Hello, lovely keyboard people, and non-lovely people, and non-keyboard people, and dogs. Today, I'm going to give you an in-depth review of this Matrix 1.2 OG WinKey TKL Blue IRL in my face keyboard. Now, this particular keyboard is made by Matrix Lab, who is a known Chinese designer and maker. And this is the WinKey variant of their 1.2 OG. This keyboard has been run a few times and mostly been only available in China for a roundabout price of about 2,500 yuan or about 385-ish US dollars at the time of recording. Hopefully at some point we can get these internationally directly from Matrix, though I doubt the price point will be as enticing. This keyboard here is a lovely TKL with a 4-degree angle as measured, so that might be off a little bit, and with a real front height, that being the front height of the first keycap on the bottom row, of about 20 millimeters, which is really, really comfy to type on. And overall, I've thrown a lot of shade at Matrix over the years, but now that I have one in hand, I like this. I like this. Anyway, before we get into the in-depth review, this unit belongs to a friend of mine, and this is a second-hand unit, so there will be some signs of use and some fingerprints, which is why I'm wearing these. And let's get on into it. One thing, before we get into this video is brought to you by this alligator. This one in particular, no other alligator. Look at him. Look how cute he is. Look how happy he is with his little blue hat and his smiley face and his softy goodness. Yes, oh. And here we are. It's nice looking, isn't it? It's quite nice looking. I'm quite a fan of the design. Some people are not super hot about the 1.2 OG design, though heavy opinions ahead. I am a big fan of very boring, very nice, classy rectangles. And that's exactly what this is. Now, we're going to do a little bit of an external case tour. Keep in mind, this board had a previous owner and then was manhandled by me and is going to its second owner real soon. So there might be some little scrapes, some little tiny little scratches, some little dings, you know, usual signs of usage. Right off the bat, we'll start with the side. Quite clean, seamed, with essentially a flat top, and the bottom makes the angle of the keyboard. Now keep in mind, the angle of this keyboard is incredibly, incredibly low at 4 degrees. Obviously not incredibly low compared to something like the Fox Orange 80 with 0 degrees. However, I found the 4-degree typing angle to be one of the most comfortable I have ever used. Right off the bat, we can see the anodization matching. Now, maybe due to the harsh light in the camera, there might look like there's some sort of difference between the top and the bottom anodization, but honestly, this is spot on. This is spot on. Now, I had complained about Matrix anodization in the past, saying that no two units had the same color, and essentially every unit was a one-off. So basically, this blue unit wouldn't look like your blue unit, but in reality, that's the case with almost every keyboard. And it was really apparent to me once I had compared my TGR Jane 2 to 2 other TGR Jane 2s of the same color. And it was like a night and day difference. So I guess that's not an excuse we can use anymore, because anodization matching is hard enough, knowing firsthand. Overall though, the anodization is well matched. Here we have a reflectivity mismatch. So this seems darker than this, but it's not actually. The color itself is very, very close. This is a normal process or result of anodizing, where, you know, smaller parts and larger parts will have slightly different reflectivity no matter how hard you try. It's really hard to get it right, but they've gotten it almost spot on. We take a look at the back and we start getting to some of the good stuff. So USB port is a B mini. Honestly, I don't mind. It's an OG original, so I don't mind this. The cutout is maybe a little wonky to the eyes, but it's actually very, very effective in terms of being able to plug in a cable without actually looking. So that's the most important thing about a port cutout, essentially, is can I take the keyboard and just plug in without looking? There we go. So mission accomplished. If I can do this with your port, then your port is A-okay. Sure, it's not the prettiest looking port cutout you've ever seen, but it's fully functional. It's inset a little bit, but again, that's probably due to the PCB. Here we've got the stereotypical Matrix badge. If you know Matrix keyboards, you know that the average Matrix keyboard has somewhere between 1 and 873 badges in random locations for no reason. Matrix likes badges, and it's become so much of a meme, or so much of commonplace, I guess, that most Chinese makers, like new Chinese makers, tend to copy the badge ideas of Matrix. I'm talking mostly about keyboards that are, being shown on Z Frontier and other Chinese forums, but apparently it worked, and I don't mind this badge. This badge works in terms of design, because you will never see it while you're using the keyboard. So nothing sticks out up top, it looks nice and clean. And then from the back, it's relatively subtle, and it's a nice balance to the placement of the weight. And then here we've got a secondary badge. Now this one is blank. I'm going to assume that there was some variant of this that allowed you to get this engraved with whatever engraving you wanted. And over here we've got a decently large, decently thick, doesn't look that big, but it is, brass weight. And if we look very carefully at this brass weight, we see that it is centered on the alphas. Now, this actually has a lot of benefits when it comes to the typing sound. Putting a brass weight under the alphas will generally make the alphas sound a little bit thicker. An internal weight under the alphas will do a little bit more than an external weight, but not bad. And the weight here is machined down to show the logo, and this is nice and deep. Let's take a look at it on the macro cam. Here we are. So you can see how nice and deep that is. So generally most engravings are not this deep, but I really like how deep this is. You can kind of see the machining marks on this, but from what I can tell, this brass weight has been cleaned. And when I say cleaned, I mean attempted to be cleaned. We can see a lot of circular marks from rubbing. We can see some marks on the edge, and obviously over here we see the original machining marks, which leads me to believe that this was polished down a little bit. Now, that also leads me to believe that this is more or less untreated brass, which is totally okay for an OG keyboard. So if you're going for a minimalistic OG style design, just raw brass or, sandblasted brass is just fine. However, for more modern keyboards, I'd like to see, electroplating or PVD or a clear coat, but I really, really appreciate this brass. A lot of people really like the patina on brass, over the years, where it turns a little bit green, a little bit blue. Not the biggest fan, though I do love the smell personally. Now, while we're here on the back, we can see here printed 8X-V1.2 original, and that's the name of the keyboard. I don't know why that's there, but hey, we'll allow it. Alrighty, sorry about that. The mosque was going wild. One of the few things I want to cover before we get to the top side is these little rubber feet, which, if you know, you know. So these are very small feet. I wish I had another foot for reference. Ooh, I do. One moment. So this is 12 millimeter, which is pretty much the standard size. Ignore the dent. These are very small. They look like 4 or 5 millimeter feet, which overall is not really a problem. However, they come out quite a bit, which means they're pretty much as tall as they are in terms of their diameter. This leads to a issue where you don't have enough adhesion from the foot onto the keyboard. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate this because I don't want to damage the feet anymore, but this means if you do have the keyboard on a desk mat and you push it forward and back, one of the feet will pop off, which is a little bit annoying. Again, the way of getting around this is to just physically lift your keyboard and put it where you want to. I just was not expecting it, and it caught me off guard. Again, while we're in the back, let's take a look at the anodization consistency. Now, in person, this is pretty good anodization. I can see a little bit of streaking, a little bit of horizontal streaking, and some patches of light and dark areas, but it is very, very unnoticeable. In terms of anodization quality, this is spectacularly clean, and the color really comes out fantastic. Now here I've got incredibly bright lights, but this is a soft blue, like an ocean blue, I guess. I'm really bad with colors, but it's a soft blue. It's not a dark blue, and it's not a light sky blue, but it comes out fantastic on this aluminum. Now, I couldn't find any information on the aluminum extrusion for the case, but this definitely looks like 6 series, though I'm not sure if it's 63 or 61. Okie dokie, let's hop into the top side before we open it up. Now, in terms of proportions, 8mm, 5mm, which is stereotypical Korean or just OG TKL dimensions, which I'm a huge fan of. The cutouts, or the internal edges, like right here, are harsh cutouts instead of soft cutouts. So this is an example of a soft corner, and this is a hard corner. So the inside edges are all relatively hard corners. Now this is a win-key version, not a win-keyless version, but the win-keyless version would also have a little bit of a straight edge on the blockers, which of course is OG and very Korean. Don't mind all of the lube all over the stabs. This is my preferred method of lubing. It's called the Coom method, and it feels fantastic. Aside from this, we can see the cutout here on the plate for the USB cutout, which, okay, pretty cool. And there are some light cuts on the plate, notably here, here, and here. Bottom row is a little bit messy, but I guess having to support so many potential layouts, especially in WinKey format, I'm okay with it. I'm honestly okay with it. I think that aesthetically, this is one of the nicest keyboards I've ever held in my hand. Okie dokie, and the one last thing I forgot to mention before we get into the internals is the adjusted front height is about 20mm. Now the adjusted front height, for reference, is the height from the bottom to the first keycap. So not right here, but measured in. The reason we measure it this way is because you could technically have a keyboard that's just a wedge and your front height would technically be 0. And that's not the real front height. Front height has to do with your own usage of the keyboard. I think that's it for the externals. So let's open this baby up and take a look inside. Alrighty, one of the first things we're going to do before we get inside is the very important screw review. The most important part of an in-depth review is taking a look at the screws. So these are Hex 2.5, very nice. Looks like stainless steel with a decent coating on it. Very shiny, very clean. This has been screwed and unscrewed a few times. There's no markings, so the steel they're using is of decent quality. one thing I really enjoy is that all of the screws are the same length. I mean, it goes without saying that for building, it's very, very convenient. However, a lot of keyboards don't do this. They'll kind of mix and match, especially if the angle is a little bit more extreme. In this case, we're dealing with a 4-degree angle, so it's a-okay. All the screws are the same length. The screws look very, very nice. And here, if we inspect the tips of the screws for any residue, we don't see any, which is an indicator that the screw taps, so basically the holes that have been drilled into the case, have been cleaned thoroughly. In the case of not being cleaned thoroughly, you'll see a little bit of black gunk here at the tip. And generally, cleaning that gunk out is part of the quality control process before a keyboard gets shipped to a customer. So 10 out of 10 for that. 10 out of 10 screws. Love these screws. All right, let's take this baby apart. Okay, let us start with the bottom. Now we can see very obvious machining marks, but this is totally okay because we are on the inside of the case. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but generally this is due to using less or no sandblasting on the case internals. So it makes it very, very easy, or essentially the anodization cover is way thinner than it would be, which allows you to see the machining marks. At least from my experience in the few keyboards that I've made, that's when I noticed interior machining marks, though I could be completely wrong. One thing I really do like here is these alignment tabs. We've got 3 alignment tabs on the bottom, 2 alignment tabs on the sides, and then a further 2 alignment tabs on the top. This kind of works as an alignment tab, I guess. But yeah. So in terms of the mounting, we can see that for the internals, the badge is secured via 2 screws and the weight is secured via 3 screws. This means there's no brass on the internals. Brass on the internals right about here, or centered near the alphas, would help and deepen the sound of the keyboard. However, spoiler alert, this keyboard does not need to be deepened at all. It sounds fantastic just the way it is. Alrighty, we can see that the screw areas right here have been machined out just a little bit, so they can match the size of the holes on the outside, which I think is pretty cool. Honestly, I think that's super cool. So all of the screw areas here, you can see here. Let me pop on the macro cam. You guys see that? See that little bump right there? Look at that. Look at that. It's the little things in a keyboard design that make or break the keyboard for me, and this is something I love to see. They could have drilled straight through and had a not so pretty back, but essentially allowing for a wider hole in the back, smaller hole here, I'm all for it. I am all for it. All right, so in terms of the case screws, we've got 4 screws on the bottom, 4 screws on the top. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 screws on the top. I'm really good at math, I promise, guys. So in terms of screw points, that's totally fine. Probably could have done without the 5th screw on the top, but it is what it is. Here we can see the lower end of the USB cutout. You see how it's recessed inwards, and the top will obviously have the rest of the USB cutout right there. So essentially, this is the entirety of the bottom. There is one thing missing from this keyboard that yours may include, and that is this piece of rubber. Now, this serves multiple purposes. This serves as a sound dampening material, which in my case, I way preferred it without this material. And secondly, in the case of having a really, really, really flexible plate, considering the angle is so low, there's not much space under the PCB. And this would prevent the PCB from shorting in the case of being way too flexible plate-wise. So this is something you'd notice if you had a polycarbonate half plate, or, you know, some other plastic, half plate or full plate, depending on the thickness. This isn't for me. However, if you think yours sounds better with this in it, that's a-okay. Okie dokie. Here we are looking at the back of the PCB. Now, a lot of people will go, ooh, it's green. Oh no, green is bad. I actually like green. Green is one of my preferred PCB colors, and this is not stock green. So this is not Matrix being cheap and buying the cheapest color available, which is green by default. This is a non-standard green, meaning they made the choice for it to be this specific green. And they also made the choice for the traces to be in yellow, which I kind of like. It's very reminiscent of like the old school keyboards that it's trying to emulate. Look at that. Look at that. I'm not a very big PCB guy, so I don't have like a huge understanding when it comes to PCBs, though from an aesthetic standpoint, I really, really enjoy this PCB. I like how all the traces are essentially going in one direction. I like how the diodes are done very, very cleanly in a pleasing or an aesthetically pleasing manner. Overall, it looks super, super clean. I'm a big fan of notations on every single key switch. This is very, very helpful for people that have a key that's not working. That way they don't have to like fiddle around trying to find the switch on the back end. Everything is clearly labeled. Everything. Even your BS key. All right, up over here, we've got the port. The port has some interesting things going on there. I don't know what those are. I assume... Nope, I have no idea. So I assumed it was a circuit to help prevent ESD, but doesn't look like it, or it doesn't look like one I would know. Down here we've got the controller, and the controller is, wait for it. Hello? Macro cam? There you are. The controller is an ARM chip instead of a ATmega. Which, again, nothing wrong with that. It's essentially completely up to the maker of the keyboard to decide what kind of chip he wants in there. You don't see ARM chips that often. You see them in two scenarios. You see them in a scenario when you're trying to do something super, super fancy that an Atmega can't really handle. Or you see it if somebody's trying to save costs, not with a chip like this, a smaller ARM chip, and essentially get a really, really, really cheap, really small ARM microcontroller. For example, we were considering an ARM controller as a replacement for the Atmega 32U2 in this one, or 34U2, because it would have been a little bit cheaper per unit, but I was just like, I'll just use the one that I'm familiar with. There goes the mosque again. Okay, see you guys in a second. Okie dokie, where were we? We were in this general area. We've got a JTAG connector for flashing, and we've got the cable that goes to the daughter board. Now, in order to check out this daughter board, I'm going to have to unscrew the plate from the case. So, I'll see you guys there. Okie dokie, we've got our obligatory screw inspection. Now, these screws that are used to hold in the plate, first of all, are Phillips head screws, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but you can clearly tell that space was definitely an issue. So I'm pretty sure they couldn't get any bigger of a head in there. So maybe Phillips head was the right decision here. The screws look like the other screws in terms of their color and coating. So I'd like to give it a 10 out of 10 for these screws, but they're just so small and dinky and Phillips head, and that kind of throws me off. I'll give it an 8.79 out of 10 for the plate screws. Alrighty. So here we can see our daughter board. That's an interesting daughter board. I've honestly never seen anything like it. Look at that. Actually, let's get that in on the macro cam so you guys can see up close what this thing looks like. Check that out. If I can get the angle right. Yeah. There we go. Check that out. So, where's my fingers? These little thingies right here are the actual LEDs. I've never seen LEDs this small. And I assume these are the controllers that power the LEDs. Quite cool, right? It's fancy looking. Now we can see the wire that comes off of the main PCB here on a, well, I don't know if this is still considered a JST. It loops back around, all the way around to plug into the front. Kind of weird that it has a hole here. And in order to connect the PCB to the upper PCB, they went under. But hey, I'm not judging. Pretty nice looking. From here, we can also see some more of the traces. You don't see them on the back side. But here we can see the vertical side of the traces. So the back is all horizontal. The front is mostly vertical. And we can see everything that's going up to the port and going down to the controller that is on this side. Quite neat. Here, there's a couple things that I find a little bit interesting. First of all, this is printed in, I assume, copper. Quite cool. But then on this side, we've got an empty piece of copper with what looks like a little place to attach a badge. So these go all the way through. And I'm not sure what this is for specifically, but I kind of like it. I kind of like it. All right, as for the plate itself, now that we can see a little bit more of the plate, we can see that there are a lot more in terms of cutouts. So we've got horizontal cutouts between the F row and the rest of the keyboard. We've got a vertical cutout here. We've got big spacers. These are generally done for sound, but can also be done for flex in essentially this axis. And we can see that the mounting points are so small, so dinky, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I can see that Matrix tried very, very hard to keep the top and side bezels as small as humanly possible. And this is actually a nice way of going about it. Now, generally, I don't like a mounting point so close to the spacebar. Generally, I like to see mounting points outside of the spacebar landing area. However, this plate actually feels really good. It feels decently nice and flexy, which leads me to believe that this is a 5 series plate, maybe a 5052 or something around there. Let's take a look at the case top. Now the case top has a lot going on. First of all, we've got the areas where the plate would mount. Cool. We can see that it barely fits in there. So these little mount points are just right. We can additionally see the areas where the alignment tabs would be. And that is very, very tight. Look at that, especially on the sides. This only leaves like 2 millimeters of material right here, which is amazing to see. For the bezel thickness on the top and on the sides, there is an astonishing amount of detail done within the case. In terms of complexity, it's up there. Down here, we see more of the same, and we see a little bit of an extra cutout here, which is quite interesting. Oh, never mind. That's the alignment tab. Alignment tab. Alrighty. Here we've got the diffuser, which is just a little piece of plastic. There we go. That just comes with the keyboard, fits nice and snug in here, and allows the, come on, get in there, and allows the LEDs of the PCB to diffuse through. If I can get it in the hole, get in the hole, get in the hole. It's like high school all over again. Okay. So final note about the PCB. Obviously, this PCB comes with Matrix's own firmware, which then allows you to fully control the RGB to a variety of interesting things. So I have it set up to blind me in the eyes with some yellow. I will demonstrate. There you go. Look at that. That's some eye-blinding yellow right there. So the stock firmware allows you to change the color, the speed, the flow, the mode of this LED strip, which is quite cool. Now, it's a little bit annoying to essentially map keys to different keys. However, this PCB can actually be used in QMK. It takes a little bit of wizardry, but it's been done by a few people. I'm not sure how much control you retain over the LEDs. However, it allows you to at least map everything per key. Now, if you're interested in getting something that's native QMK, there has been an interest check or a group buy. I'm not sure what the progress of it is currently, but you can Google that. You Google Matrix 1.2 OG PCB, and there are replacement PCBs coming that are native QMK. This is if you have an issue with the key mapping. For me, I have a little bit of an issue with the key mapping since I like to use my control here and my windows here. I was able to get control here as one of the native configurations. However, it moved caps lock here, which is technically a correct layout. It's Unix control OG caps lock. So on the very old keyboards, your control was here, your caps was here. So it is technically accurate. It's just not the layout that I personally use. I like my windows here because I'm used to having a Win keyless blocker. However, it doesn't ruin it for me at all. I've actually been thoroughly enjoying this keyboard. All right, before we get into the sound test, I'm going to do a relatively new segment where I talk about my suggestions in terms of build. Now, overall, like I said, this is a soft feeling aluminum plate. Some of you may have a different plate. A lot of people told me this doesn't look like my plate. It's okay if your plate doesn't look like this, but in general, from what I've gathered from speaking to a few owners of the 1.2, it is a comfortable aluminum plate. In addition to being a comfortable aluminum plate, it's rather deep sounding, surprisingly deep sounding. So depending on what you want to do, you've got some options here. So if you want it to sound even deeper, you want to accentuate the depth and the thickness of the internal reverb when you type on it, you can go with a deep sounding switch, which is what I've done in this case. These are Milky top Gateron yellows that have been broken in, lubed with 205 grade 0 with, I'm not sure which springs, but pretty sure they're 62 gram Hojing or TX. This allowed me to get it to sound even deeper, which I really enjoyed. So if you want it to sound really deep, go with a deep sounding switch like a Milky top Gateron. If the depth of the keyboard is a little too boomy for you, you can put in the silicone mat under, which will dampen it a little bit. However, if it's overall too loud, you could go for a fully silenced build. So that means silent switches, non-clipped or Band-Aid modded stabilizers, and then a relatively quiet key set, so something without too much hollowness within the keycap itself. If you're trying to raise the pitch of this build, so you don't like the boominess and you want it to sound more crisp, kind of like a Korean keyboard, you'd essentially want it to sound higher pitch and more dense, and also quieter. So the play for that, assuming you had the aluminum plate, would be higher pitch switches like JWKs or SP stars or Panda housings, anything like that, or full clear housings as well, something like Zeal or RGB Cherry, God forbid. So get those and consider a thinner sounding keycap, something like DCS. Now keep in mind, DCS may sound thin, but it feels really good, in my opinion. And then you'd also want to use the silicone dampener as well to try and reduce the sound as much as possible. The best play if you're trying to actually raise the pitch of this keyboard is to swap the plate, because this is just a very boomy plate. I'd go with something polycarbonate if you're trying to raise the pitch. I'd go with FR4 if you're trying to silence the overall sound. I'd go for steel if you just want to go all out and make it sound like you're typing on a massive keyboard even though you're not. So that's pretty much it for my suggestions. We're going to move into the typing test. Afterwards, I'll give you my summary, and we'll see where it goes from there. Eh? 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 Never have I ever been so confused with a keyboard like this. I really like this, and I don't know why. I don't know why. So many things are done right. Actually, pretty much everything is done right. It's amazing for me, somebody who's into more OG looking, feeling, and sounding keyboards. Now, this keyboard obviously sounds nothing like an OG Korean keyboard. This sounds nice and deep like a Western keyboard. This allows you to have the feel and design of a Korean keyboard, but with the sound profile of a Western keyboard. I think that's fantastic. I think that, PCB aside, this thing is as good as it gets for a standard OG TKL. You've got a very comfortable 4-degree typing angle, which I love 4-degree typing angles now, apparently. It's incredibly comfortable. The typing experience, even on a full aluminum plate, is soft. It's not flexy, but it's soft. The physical bottom outs are not rough on your fingertips when you bottom out super hard. It sounds fantastic, feels fantastic, it looks fantastic. Now, next question is, Simon, I want one of these, but on Mech Market, they're all $3,987. Probably not, but I'm hoping that more runs of this keyboard are done. I hope that they're offered internationally, and I hope that the price point is somewhat fair. In its current configuration like this, I'm comfortable paying about $400 for this, maybe even $420, plays it, for a keyboard like this. Now, the Chinese price in RMB is 2,500, which is shy of $400. And I assume the going flipping rate for this is way, way higher. I will give you guys the same advice I give everyone, which is wait. In this hobby, waiting will always get you where you need to go. Eventually it will be rerun. Eventually you will get one at a fair price. As long as you keep trying, and as long as you keep the idea in your head that I always have $400 set aside for when I can get my hands on a Matrix 1.2 OG. And that's the way that I see it as well. If I get an opportunity to buy one, I definitely will. I definitely will. This particular unit belongs to a friend, but it's taking everything in me for me not to yoink this and just be like, oh no, it got lost. How unfortunate. I'm kidding, obviously. I'll get my own one of these. Sure, it's got the Matrix memes, so it's got, you know, unnecessary badges and all of that, but I don't really care. I would like this just as much if it didn't have this badge. It doesn't change anything for me. It looks kind of cool. If this was sitting over there in the cabinet on a little stand, it's a showy keyboard. I enjoy that. I enjoy that. Uh, Overall, 10 out of 10. I mean, if Matrix could literally make like 2 changes to this, the feet that literally come off for no reason, and a PCB that supports a firmware that wasn't built in, you know, 1980. Besides that, I absolutely love this keyboard so much. And if you have an opportunity to actually try out a Matrix, whether it be at a friend's house or a meetup once, you know, the world stops burning, you should give it a shot. You should definitely give it a shot. And if you didn't like the sound profile from the typing test, keep in mind that as long as you try hard enough, you can make any keyboard sound like anything if you want. I personally love how this particular unit sounds in its current configuration, without the silicone and with a nice deep sounding switch. It gives the illusion of typing on a bigger keyboard. You feel like you have more power. Now, I'm a big keyboard guy, and by that I mean I like big keyboards, and I cannot lie. But when I type on this, I feel like I'm typing on a nice full size, even though it's a TKL. In terms of the feel, in terms of the sound, it presents itself with a surprising amount of power, even though when you take a look at it, it's a fairly standard TKL. And I kind of like that. I kind of really like that. So this is one of the few keyboards that I'll recommend to almost anybody that likes TKL and likes a pleasant typing experience. So yeah, that's my review. I'll see you guys next time. Going rate for this keyboard was about 2,500 Chinese yuan, which is about 350. No, why am I so bad at numbers? Fuck. Just read the numbers, Simon. The numbers. What do they mean? Why don't I do math? Why don't I do math? Just do the math, Simon. This particular keyboard here is no. Flamingo.